Hi patrons. Not even gonna say anything about hoping to get these videos done earlier anymore. It is the last day of April and it hasn't happened yet. So yeah. Since this month's focus was on transforming our relationship to movement, I wanted to do something a little different tonight. I think that one of the important lessons that I've learned through transforming my relationship with movement has been listening to my body and listening to what my body needs in a certain moment. And anybody who's taken a class with me before knows that sometimes I just tailor my classes to how I'm feeling at the time. I don't really plan my classes ahead of time. I just kind of go with the flow of my body. I choose what poses to come into at the moment that I'm gonna come into them. And I'm just familiar enough with my practice and with the poses to be able to kind of call that out as it happens. And what that does for me is it allows me to really just move intuitively. It allows me to honor my body and where I'm at. For example, on a day that I am tired and sore, I will listen to my body and do a slow, grounded practice with long holds, and just really take it slow and restorative and easy. And on days where I have energy built up in my body, then maybe I'll do a more vigorous practice, a lot of vinyasa passes, a lot of standing poses, things like that. So what I wanted to do with this video this month is give you an idea of how to structure your own practice so that you can choose what you want to be doing when you're listening to your body. So to give you some options for a practice that is a little slower, a practice that has a little bit more energy to it. So kind of what I'm gonna do is lead you through a practice. I wouldn't follow like this video as like your daily practice because it's gonna be kind of like choose your own adventure style. I will give you a few different options for how you could proceed through your practice. And basically what I want this to be for is so that you can pick and choose pieces of that practice to put together to build your own practice that really reflects how your body is feeling. So it'll be more like talking through the practice, talking through the poses. I'll still show the poses, but it won't be, this video isn't like a practice for you this month. It's more of a build your own practice tutorial. So we'll get started. All of our practices start and end with meditation. That's really important to me because yoga as a practice, as a philosophy, is about preparing our body and mind to meditate. So it's really important to start with meditation, to bring yourself to the practice, to bring yourself to awareness, to really create that sacred space of reverence. So we typically start with that meditation seated. That's how I typically start my classes. You can start your class from any position. You can start, or your practice. You can start your practice from any position. You can be seated, you could be standing, you could be lying down, you could be in a restorative pose, you could be in child's pose. So think about that when you think about starting your own practice. You want to be in a position that allows you to relax enough to connect to your mind and your body and your breath. So you don't want to be in like a complicated pose that you can't hold for very long, or you don't want to be in a pose where you can't access your breath very well. You just want to be in a comfortable space where you can sit and you can prepare your mind for practice. I always talk through a meditation at the beginning of practice. But obviously, if you're not listening to a practice, then there's no one to do that with you. So the things that I kind of go through in that opening meditation are checking in with the breath, checking in with the body, checking in with the mind. So it could be as simple as just asking yourself, like, where do I feel my breath right now? Where do I feel my body right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? And you can kind of just sit with that awareness as you start your practice. And then once we're done with the meditation, we move into some slower, grounded flows, whatever that may look like for you. And there's a few different ways to start that. If you're seated, it's very easy to start seated, and we do things like arm flow, just getting the breath and the body moving together. We do things like twists to both sides. We do things like side stretches. So that's a great way to start your practice seated, is some arm movements, some twists, some side stretches. You can even do some forward bends, which I usually like to do at the end of practice, but there's no reason you can't start with those. Another common place to start is tabletop, starting with our cat-cows, adding in some other movements, and then always adding in a twist. So I like to do from hands and knees, thread the needle. That's what I typically cue as a twist. When we're doing these seated, grounded positions at the front of the practice, at the very beginning of the practice, what we want to be able to do for our bodies is to warm up our spines in both directions, so flexion and the other one, the opposite of flexion. So we want to be able to move our spine in both directions, and we want to get a twist in. So wherever you're starting your practice from, be it hands or knees, be it seated, you always want to make sure that you're getting the spinal movements in here. Seated cat-cows are another great way to do that. And you want to be getting your twists in. And that just warms up your whole spine and your whole back body to come into your practice. So we meditate, we start seated or tabletop or child's pose or any place where we can get some movement of the spine and the twisting of the spine. And then we start that slow. You take as much time as you want to kind of build up. When we're talking about building up a practice, we're talking about coming typically from grounded upwards, and usually we do that through a downward facing dog transition. So typically what I'll do is from table, I like to tuck the toes and press the hips to the heels to open the soles of the feet. You don't have to do that. I just really like to do that in my practices, so it's in most of my classes. You can just come from down dog or from table to down dog. And if you're not feeling standing poses at all during your practice, you can drop back down to your knees, do some cat-cows. I have a kind of sun salutation-ish series that I do from grounded that goes from cat-cows to up to the knees, to a back bend, up, and back to down dog. So you can cycle through that. You can come into runner's lunges, low lunges. You can do twists from your low lunges. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do without ever standing up if you don't want to. You can build an entire series that stays near the ground, and the highest that you get is down dog. Always an option. So those are some of the things I like to do, is those lunges. I also really like lizard and hamstring stretches. These are all kind of approximations of a standing series that you could do if you're really feeling low and slow and grounded. You can keep all that going without ever having to stand up. So you can go in the choose your own adventure style. From down dog, you can keep it grounded. You can start going through those cat-cow sun salutations, or you can do some lunges, you can do some lizards, some hamstring stretches. You can take it back to seated, or if you're feeling it, you can come from down dog to start a standing series. So you can look forward and step or jump. And then I typically like to go right into some sort of sun salutation flow from here. So inhale halfway, exhale fold, inhale rise, exhale mountain. And again, from here, you can take any standing direction that you'd like. So once we get up to standing, we usually do some sun salutations to build heat and build energy in the body so that we can use that energy for the rest of our standing poses. So there are several sun salutation variations. The one that I typically stick to is a sun salutation A. You're all familiar with it from doing practices with me. So inhale, arms rise. Exhale to fold. Inhale to lift. Exhale to plant the hands. Step back. Chaturanga or knees, chest, chin. Inhale, up dog or cobra. And exhale, down dog. And you can do that flow as many times as you like. I don't know why 3 is the magic number, but a lot of times you will see that flow done in 3s. So you can do 1 of those, 2 of those, 3 of those, however many you want. In some practices, they do 108 sun salutations in a row. So if you've got a lot of energy to move, your whole practice could be those sun salutations. It really depends on what you're feeling in your body at the time, and knowing that there is no like right practice. There is no except in Ashtanga, there is no series of poses that is yoga. So as many sun salutations as you want, or no sun salutations. You can also just come from mountain and start to do any of your standing series poses. Again, you can also use this as a checkpoint to come back to the ground. So if you're done after some sun salutations, taking it back to the ground for those lunges, low lunges, lizard, seated poses, all of that if you'd like. But if you're feeling that energy, if you want to use that energy in your standing poses, you can move into some classic standing poses. So a lot of the times a very basic sequence will be inhale, arms rise, right foot back to crescent, holding here for a few breaths, opening up to warrior 2, holding here, straightening the front leg and hinging, listening to my knee pop for triangle, holding here, coming back up to warrior 2, and back up. So that's one that you could choose to do. You can also piece in any standing poses that you'd like here. That's part of what I love about yoga, is this exploration. We can build whatever our body is feeling today. So if I'm feeling like I really need some forward folds in my practice, then I can come crescent lunge, warrior 2, 5-pointed star, and hang out in a forward fold for as long as I'd like. And then I can come back pointed star, warrior two, and back up. Maybe I don't feel like doing any warriors. Also fine. From this standing, I can come into pyramid and do that fold. I can come into a shorter legged forward fold, maybe ragdoll. I could do a balancing series, tree, or opening up the hips, or eagle, or warrior three. So you'll figure out what works for your body. You'll figure out how to tune into your body and find the poses that you want to do. And I think the most liberating thing for me in teaching yoga and practicing yoga myself is learning that, like, the things I see in class are not how I have to do yoga at all. I can put any of these poses together. I can put them all together. I can skip poses that I hate. That's one of the best things that I learned practicing on my own, is that if I don't like a pose, I don't put it in my practice. You know, so if there's something that you have been in classes thinking, God, I never want to do this pose again, don't do it in your own practice. Don't make yourself do that pose just because you think that it's part of a sequence. Like, you build your own sequence. So from this standing, you can build any sequence that you want. You can include or exclude any poses that you want. So if you've chosen to do a standing series, usually we come back from the standing series and progressively get lower and lower to the ground. So what a lot of people will do from here, what I like to do, is do one more Sun Sal A. And from here, if you want the whole Sun Sal, you can do it. You can also just step directly back to down dog. You can also step to hands and knees to bring yourself down to table. So deciding where you want to go from standing. Typically, I really love to go to pigeon from here. So we come to down dog, coming into pigeon, holding here, coming back up, pigeon second side, and hold here, and come back up. If you don't like pigeon, if it doesn't work for your body, you can come right down to table. Or if you just don't feel like it, you can come right back down to table. And from here, again, it's about adding in the poses that you want, the poses that you like. So sometimes we come down after the standing series and we realize, yeah, I still got energy to go. If that's the case, adding in some cat-cows, adding in some bird dog balances, adding in the side plank series that I love to do. Any of that is a great way to keep that body moving, keep that energy going until you feel that you're ready to come down and start to calm down with some lower to the ground poses. So again, you don't have to come back to table. You can come right back to seated. If you wanted to, you could even lie down right from there. But generally what we're trying to do is progressively ratchet up our practice and then ratchet down our practice. So from that standing, you can go to down dog, do some pigeon. If you want, you can go to down dog, come down to your knees for table. If you've got some energy to burn, you can do those cat-cows, the side plank series. You can even stand back up if you wanted to. If you really feel like you've got more to do, you can go from that down dog back to standing and do some more standing poses. But once you feel you're ready to come down, or maybe you've been down here the whole time, it's time to do some close to the ground seated stuff. So a few that I love that you all know: butterfly, forward fold, figure four, or fire log, figure four, fire log, wide leg, forward fold, hamstring stretches, both sides, or straight in front. I have a little too much belly for straight in front, so I come a little wider, still a hamstring stretch, versus here, which is more of a adductor stretch. So those are some of the seated ones I love. Whenever you're doing a lot of forward folds, and I'm not very good at this in my practices sometimes, whenever you're doing a lot of forward folds, you want to make sure that you're counteracting with some back bends. So y'all are familiar with my favorite, which is coming down to saddle pose, getting a little bit of that quad in there as well. Other option is the standing knee back bend. You can also come into camel, reaching for those heels, or from seated, we can reach the legs out in front, hands come, fingers in, down here, and you can push up for a small back bend here, or if you're really feeling a challenge, you can lift the butt off the ground and hover there. As long as we're getting that back both bent forward and bent back to even it all out. You can also do your twists from here. There's a bunch of different twists that you can do from seated. Again, you can come to the arms, seated. Really, the moral of the story is whatever feels good for your body. Child's pose is also an option here. So if you wanted to, from table, come down into child's pose, one that you know I all love is the wide-legged extended. And then we reach to one side. We reach to one side. And come back to center. You can also try knees up, arms out, chest down for puppy pose. And there's also scores of poses that you can do from your stomach. Not gonna lie, I do not like stomach poses. I do not like face down on the mat poses. So I don't almost ever teach them. However, there's some really good poses from down there that feel good in other people's bodies. So you can also investigate coming straight down to your belly and doing like a baby cobra or a regular cobra. You can do Supermans. You can do frog pose. You can do all sorts of things on your stomach as well. So we've come down. We're doing either seated or on our knees. Some back bends. We want to make sure that we're bending forward and back. Or you can come down onto your stomach, or you can come down onto child's pose. So lots of options to bring yourself back down to the ground. And then once we've kind of settled on the ground, slowed down practice a little bit, it's time to go back down to the back. A few ways to get there. I always like to give, not always, a lot of the times, I like to give one opportunity to do like a harder pose if people still feel like they gotta get that like oomph out before we lie down. So if you still feel like you gotta get the oomph out, coming to boat pose. If you're done and ready to lie down, always the option to just pull knees into chest and rock it out on the low back. And I usually, to be honest, don't leave enough time for poses on the back. There's a lot more than I typically teach because I'm usually running out of time. So things that you can do from your back, you can come to bridge pose. You can do one leg up in the air for a hamstring stretch, and then another leg up in the air. You can do both legs up in the air. If it's in your practice, you can do shoulder stand or wheel, neither of which I can demo for you, but they're wonderful poses. You can do happy baby. You can do reclined butterfly or reclined butterfly. There's so many things you can do from this position. Figure four twist, also one of my favorites. And then typically we end with a spinal twist, just as kind of a way to get that spine all run out. And this is only one spinal twist. I teach it in all of my classes because it's my favorite. But you can do one leg long, one leg over. You can do one leg up here, one leg over. There are a ton of spinal twists that you can find as well. So, again, when we come down onto the back, give yourself the option to do another challenging pose. If you feel like you have that in you, or just come right down to that back. And then add in whatever feels good for your body. And one of the things that I like to think about once we've come back down to the back is like that final check before my Shavasana of what does my body need right now? Is my body done? Am I ready for rest? Am I ready for that Shavasana? Or do I still feel like I've got something to move? And if I feel like I've got something to move, I'll do a lot of happy babies, or, you know, I'll do a few rounds of bridge pose. Or maybe I'll, you know, do some windshield wipers with the knees. There's a lot of ways to still move that energy when you're down to your back. And it's really important to get out whatever like you feel like you got in your body before you come into Shavasana. And then we always end with Shavasana. So a lot of people like to do flat on their back for Shavasana. That's murder on my low back. I like to bend my knees and tent them in. Some people like to do reclined butterfly. Some people like to have a pillow under their knees. Some people come to their side, especially if you're pregnant. Any of those positions is Shavasana. The only requirement for Shavasana, and I mean, requirement is a strong word. The only suggestion for Shavasana is that you be in a position where you can find rest, where you can connect to the ground, where you can feel the support below you, and where you can find stillness. And again, we always start and end with meditation. The point of yoga is to prepare our bodies for that meditation. So if we're doing the asana, the poses, and we're doing the flow, but we're skipping the Shavasana and not doing that end meditation, that's not really yoga. We're here to quiet our body and quiet our mind for meditation. So once we get to the end, getting into our comfortable Shavasana, and again, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. You can do some breath work, like some Ujjayi breath, where you're breathing from the back of that throat, the ocean sounding breath. You could do box breathing, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. You could do some 2-part breathing, some into the chest, into the belly, out the chest. You don't have to do breath work either. You could just connect to the breath and relax. I tend to do the same kind of check-in that I do in the beginning meditation at the end meditation as well. How am I breathing? How is my body feeling? How is my mind feeling? And once I kind of run through that check-in, that allows me to clear out enough to be ready to sit in that meditation. And you don't have to meditate for very long here. We're not like aiming for any like monkly stuff. I like to give it at least a minute, or I really like to give it at least 2 minutes to just sit there lay there, sit there, whatever, in silence, and to really reflect on the practice, reflect on how my body feels, reflect on just my life. It's my opportunity to connect in. So yeah, and then once we've done our meditation, once we've done our Shavasana, not everybody, like you can get up and walk after your Shavasana, like the meditation is the end of the practice technically. I really like to do a little like wrap up and a little like closing of practice, even when I practice with myself, because it really just lets me say like, I'm going off into the rest of my life. So as you all know, I have my little like mantra at the end of class. Take a moment for gratitude, thanking yourself for practicing today, for doing this thing that is just for you, your mind, your body, your spirit. And I always end practice with breath, because that's the core of us, of life, of yoga, is breath. So I always like to end my practices with a deep breath in and an open mouth exhale. And that might not be what works for you. You can end your practice any way that you'd like. So that was a lot of information. But again, what I'm hoping can come from this video is the ability to structure your own practice, to start exploring how can I put a practice together for myself? How can I engage with the poses that I really want to engage with? How can I listen to my body and create a practice that is completely responsive to the way that my body feels today? So I'd love any feedback on this video. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments on the video or send me a message. And as always, I'm really grateful for all of your support.